the most important place. And I'm delighted to have an opportunity to meet with all of you this morning and get you even more pumped up, because I think you are, to go out and get the vote, because that is ultimately what it's all about. I have known Hillary for some time. She's 10 years younger than I am, but we went to the same college, Wellesley, so I know where she got her study habits. Also, I first got to know her when she was head of the Children's Defense Fund. And what was so incredible about that, and showed one of her very basic traits, is that she wanted to give a voice to those who couldn't speak for themselves. And that is something that is very much a part of her DNA, and something that she will always continue to do, that she cared about the children, the families, but being able to really give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. Then, when the first Clinton administration started, I was ambassador to the United Nations, and Hillary, as First Lady, we got to know each other very well. There are a lot of people who kind of think that she was channeling Eleanor Roosevelt by wanting to come up to the UN, because that's what Eleanor Roosevelt did. And Hillary would come up, and I would introduce her to a lot of the other permanent representatives, and she got very interested in what the opportunities were for the UN in the early 90s. And then there was the Women's Conference in Beijing. And there was a real question as to whether it was appropriate for the First Lady to go to Beijing to talk about human rights. And so she decided absolutely. By the way, for the people here who always ask me questions about life balance, how did I do it? I actually had to leave my own daughter's wedding reception. It was well worth it. And I was technically the head of the delegation, but obviously Hillary was the superstar. And we've all been to lots of conferences and things, and there's always a lot of buzzing and meetings on the side. But when Hillary spoke, the place was absolutely silent. And then she delivered that message of human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights, and set the agenda for women's issues internationally. Now, one of her other traits is she never lets anything go. So last year was the 20th anniversary of the Beijing Women's Conference, and so she asked the people around her to figure out whether the other countries had lived up to the contracts or compacts that they had signed, and the benchmarks, and what we were doing. And so that is another one of her characteristics. When I became Secretary of State, we did a lot of things together. And by the way, I am totally in the tank for Hillary for any number of reasons. But one is, I would not have been Secretary of State if it hadn't been for her. And the reason I know that is President Clinton said so publicly. So just to put you back in the context, it was clear that Secretary Christopher wasn't going to stay for a second term. And there was a lot of, it's called the period of the great mentioning, when in fact there were questions about who would be the next Secretary of State. And I was a cabinet member as a result of being ambassador to the UN, and then a member of this small committee called Principals that were the ones that kind of set up the issues on national security policy so the president could make the decisions. So my name was out there, and somebody said, yeah, well, no, this is never going to happen because the Arabs will never accept a woman Secretary of State. So then the Arab ambassadors at the UN got together and said, we've had no problems dealing with Ambassador Albright. We wouldn't have any problems with Secretary Albright. So that went away. Then somebody at the White House, and I never want to know who, said, yeah, Madeline's on the list, but she's second tier. So apparently what happened was that, and then again, once I was Secretary of State, often President Clinton and First Lady Clinton and I would travel together, and I would introduce her, she would introduce him. So we were in Guatemala, and so the president gets up and describes this period, and he says, during this period of the Great Mentioning, Hillary would come to him and say, why wouldn't you name Madeline? She is most in tune with your views, expresses them better than anybody else, and besides, it would make your mother happy. So, once I was secretary, I asked her to kind of act as a super ambassador for the United States. So another trait of hers came out, which was that when she traveled abroad, there clearly were the meetings in the fancy rooms, but what she liked most of all was going out and listening to people. And she is a terrific listener, and she really wants to know what was on the minds of the people. And she met with a lot of different groups as she traveled abroad. Then she became senator, and she, I think, was a remarkable senator. And a lot of people thought that once she'd gotten elected, that she'd go to the Senate and be a diva. Absolutely not. It's the opposite. She put her head down. She really worked, got to know her colleagues well. And then from the perspective of national security issues, which is something that she and I talk about a lot, going on the Armed Services Committee was a really big deal because it allowed her to learn a lot about how our military operates, what the relationship is between the military and civilian general decision makers, what the veterans needed, and then she also showed how she can work across the aisle, because with Lindsey Graham, she helped to develop a health care package for the National Guard, and so that was an incredible experience. And then finally, what we all know that Senator Obama and Senator Clinton ran against each other. And then when Senator Obama became President-elect Obama, he asked Hillary to come and be his Secretary of State. I am chairman of an organization called the National Democratic Institute that does a lot of work abroad on democracy in terms of nuts and bolts, etc. And one of the things we talk about is coalition building. Compromise is not a four-letter word. And so what happened is when the two of them combined as a team, stronger together, to lead our country in national security policy, it was an incredible lesson about what has to be done when people disagree and they finally come together for the good of the country. So while she was secretary, she restored America's reputation, no question. I travel around an awful lot now. The leaders of other countries really respect her. There's just no question. And by the way, as I travel around now, they say, "Are you people crazy?" It's like there's a choice. I mean, and that he is endlessly dangerous. But the bottom line is, just to sum this all up, there has never been anybody as well prepared to be President of the United States as Hillary Clinton. She has all the is a bonus. And I think it will be great when she is president. It'll be the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. Yay. So all the women, we got to get out there and use that vote. So I just think that there can't be a more important time to have somebody that is as prepared as she is in a period of time when the world is a mess. That's a diplomatic term, Bart. And people are questioning what America's role is, how we will behave. She knows how to do it, and she will be a great president. One last thing. I'm a naturalized American. I came here when I was 11 years old. I was a refugee. And so when I describe myself, I always say grateful American. My father was a Czechoslovak diplomat, and we spent the war in England, and then he went back to Czechoslovakia. He became ambassador to Yugoslavia, and then the communists took over. We came to the United States. He defected and asked for political asylum. And I became a citizen at the time while I was in college, between my sophomore and junior year. And my father, on a regular basis, used to say, when we were in Europe, people would say, "We're so sorry your country's been taken over by a terrible dictator. You're welcome here. What can we do to help you, and when are you going home?" When we came to the United States, people said, "We're so sorry your country's been taken over by a terrible system. You're welcome here. What can we do to help you, and when will you become a citizen?" And my father said, that is the difference between America and every other country. I can't swear people in for their naturalization ceremonies, but I can give them their naturalization certificates, and I love doing that. And I heard some man say, "Can you believe that I, as a refugee, got my naturalization certificate from the Secretary of State?" And I said, "Can you believe that a refugee was Secretary of State?" about citizenship that is so important. It is a privilege and a responsibility. And you all are the people that will help others figure out where to vote and how to get through the process and the importance of their vote. It is what makes America what it is, and we have to help the people get to the polls and really be motivated about taking that privilege and responsibility so seriously. So I can't thank all of you enough for what you're doing, what you will do. We will have Hillary Clinton as president.
So thanks, as I said, we're going to have the line. We're going to start it over here. We're going to ask you to for your photo with the secretary, and then we'll ask you to leave this way. Afterwards, we are going to have a reception with food and coffee, so if you do want to come back and stay, we'd love to have you. All right, thanks.